So welcome everyone to our latest Look Parent Support Group online information event. I'm Jane Ring, the Parent Support Officer, and I have some colleagues with me. I have Charlotte, who might wave at you. She is a Mentor Project Officer. So she looks after the mentoring partnerships, one of our team. And I also have Jo, who is she's not got her camera on, but she's our project assistant. There she is, she's waving at you too. So Jo and I are both parents of visually impaired children, and we just love putting on these events where we can hopefully provide support and information on the subjects that you all care about as well. And friendship comes up in our talking sessions a lot. It's something I know that parents worry about, and we've got a really good panel together today. So we've got Laura Brooks, who I'm really delighted could join us. She's a QTVI, so she'll be talking about her experiences, what they do in their sensory service to support children. And we shall take copious notes and add her top tips to the resources that we send out afterwards. We also have Ellen, who is an expert by experience. She's one of our brilliant steering group members, and she's going to share some of the practical things that how her son is supported at school. We then have two amazing mentors who've both got different experiences of friendships, Eliza and Imogen. We did have a couple more, but unfortunately flu season is upon us, and poor Kevin and Callum are both poorly, but I might actually get them to record their thoughts afterwards, because it's always good to have a male perspective as well. But that is our brilliant panel for tonight. So as I said in my email, we will have time for questions. If you think of something, so I know when people talk, quite often think, I'd really want to ask that. So please feel free to use the chat. We will make sure that we're keeping an eye on the chat, and that that when there's a pause, then we'll ask the questions then. So both Charlotte and Jo will be doing that. So how we'll run it is that Laura and then Ellen will speak from their different perspectives. We'll have a pause for questions then, and then we'll hear from the two mentors. So I've given till 9:30. And I never know how long these meetings last, but feel free to interact with us and ask questions along the way. And I hope you find it really informative. So I shall now stop talking, remind you that we are recording it, and it will go on the website, so along with resources when they're ready, so you can forward that on to people. Okay, so without further ado, I shall introduce you to Laura. Thank you for coming, Laura. It's great to have a perspective of QTVI.
Okay, thank you. I feel already bowed by the level of experience and knowledge that's in the rest of the panel, that I think mine might seem quite thin, what I'm going to say. So I'm a QTVI and I work in an outreach team, and mainly my caseload is children in mainstream secondary schools, and where they will typically be, if not the only pupil with visual impairment in their school, the only one in their year group or in their peer group. And I'd say universally there'll be varying levels, but there will be some level of social isolation and difficulties with friendship. Even when it's at quite a low level, I'd say it's still more difficult for young people with visual impairment than it is for their sighted peers. And it's something that I think we always have to address with what we do in schools and with what we do at home and with what we do in the community. It's a major training issue to get schools to prioritise social inclusion and friendships as something that they have to plan for, and they have to sort of think about how they're going to work on this. From our point of view, it's really crucial that we're always pushing the approach that leads to sort of maximum independence and minimum amount of time where you're sat next to an adult or having the teacher with you. And really that's around showing that the main thing to do is to get things accessible so that then these young people can be with their friends or with the peer group or sat not right at the front all the time, so that they're kind of getting a more normal experience. And schools want to help and they want to support these young people, but sometimes actually what they're doing is having a negative effect. So it's kind of pushing that and getting the school staff who want to help, who are in this job because they care, to realise how important stepping back is. And for teachers thinking about this when they're or planning activities, planning seating plans and things like that. And it's always a bit of a battle. I think schools are so pressured around results and targets that aren't how happy or confident somebody's feeling to make friends. So it's kind of a bit of an uphill struggle, but the results are just really, really worth it. And you see where it hasn't been done or where somebody's been over supported, it's really, really damaging. Within schools, so obviously there's the training that we deliver for staff where we're pushing that all the time. We also will, if a pupil wants to, jointly deliver peer awareness training for their class or their friendship group or their year group in any sort of form that they're confident to do. Sometimes they actively don't want us to do this. Sometimes we've got to do a bit of arm twisting and say, well, why don't you pick a couple of friends and you can just talk to them? Or it's really, really useful for lots of reasons for them to be able to advocate for themselves and explain what their needs are. But sometimes we will kind of back off from that if they're really uncomfortable and don't want to do it, and try and time it at a time when they will get involved with doing some peer awareness training. Schools obviously have things like staff mentors and buddying systems, which we encourage them to use sensitively with visually impaired young people. And something that I always push for is that they try and identify a way in which the pupil with visual impairment can be a buddy or support to someone else, whether it's another person with visual impairment, but often that isn't the case because they aren't in the school with them, but possibly a child with another kind of need like anxiety or something where they can actually buddy up with someone where they're not on the receiving end of the support, but they're delivering it as well. And then another thing that we really have quite a lot of effort put into is really working on self-advocacy skills with those children so that they can explain their own needs and deal with issues themselves as they arise. You know, they're not always going to have us there or a parent there, and they do have to. I always say it would be awful if school was perfect, because you're going to have a right shock when you get out into life if there wasn't problems that you had to try and sort out for yourself or ask for support to resolve. I mean, related to this, and it's a really tricky issue, is one thing that we feel is really important is, if we're saying we believe in self-advocacy and listening to pupil voice, really being led by them in how they want to learn and how they want to be supported. So this can be students that I think should be using Braille, not using Braille in certain lessons, or students using a smaller print size than they really, really should be doing, because that's what they feel comfortable with. And I think that helps them to feel more confident if they're having some control over what they are seen by their peers using. Obviously, we would want them to feel comfortable and confident to use exactly the right thing for themselves at every time, but it's really important, I think, that we don't just sort of bulldoze them with this is what you have to do, because we all know when you're in a group of teenagers or with your friends, you don't always do what you would just comfortably do at home. You want to act in certain ways that make you feel better. So those are kind of some of the things that we find we're doing in the schools. Within our service, we also run groups where we try to bring these students together who are the one or two in their school. So before COVID, we did have kind of quite sporty after school club activities that we would transport kids from different schools to. Obviously, with lockdown, that all became online meetings like this one. And that opened up quite a lot of opportunities for giving them access to a range of role models, listening to people who had just recently gone on to university from our schools, or people who had started work who used to be in the same position of having me turn up and annoy them on a regular basis in their school. So it really, really worked well for them, having the opportunity to come together and listen like this, listen to people who are having the same experience. And now we try and run a mixture of some in-person activity groups and some online groups where we can sort of link up with people who are experiencing or have experienced some of the visual impairment issues and friendship issues and traveling and other things that can sort of limit your confidence. I think it's not just parents and schools that might feel that these things aren't the priority for them, if you know what I mean, I think our students can think this isn't as important as their GCSE results or their grades, even though sometimes I'll be saying, well, come to this group, and the student's response will be, well, I've got maths that day, I don't want to do that, I've got to get my grades. And so sometimes it's really about having that discussion with people about what if you can't make a friend, your grade at GCSE isn't going to make a difference to how you succeed at university, if you see what I mean, that you need those skills to be successful, and they are every bit as important as your academic achievements. And like I say, some parents get that immediately, but a lot of schools and a lot of students don't really, they think that it's a distraction. So we kind of work quite hard on that. And then also, I think it's really important that we signpost our students to other organisations that are going to be useful to them now or in the future. Our input is for quite a limited time, and as soon as you leave school, then where are you going for this support that you've been getting in your mainstream school? So we try and sort of, wherever we can, be making those links and getting students to understand where they can go in the future. We're lucky in our service that we have a couple of members of staff who are trustees of the Outlook Trust, which is a charity that organises in the Lake District. They take students with visual impairments sailing and climbing and bike riding and lots of things like that. They have weekends away, and because some of our staff already work with us, they know the students and they go away with the Outlook Trust. So it's another thing where you're pushing your child or your parents to, and to be honest, it is parents who have more issues with going away and the kind of anxiety around it. But we're just sort of, we're a little bit more connected because of the staff that are involved from our team. I think overall it's about, the way I view it is it's about pushing your young person to do something that they're a little bit scared of, but that they are going to probably succeed at all the time, so that you're just getting that next step of, there's got to be some challenge in what they're making themselves do. They can't always have it safe and comfortable. There will be things that are embarrassing or social failures, if you like. I was talking to one of my ex-students about, he was going to a youth club in his local community centre, and he used to always go with his cousin, and then one week his cousin couldn't come, and he was beforehand saying, I'm not sure if I'll go, if Jamie's not going. And then he went, and then we talked about it the next week, and he'd had quite an uncomfortable experience, and sat where nobody talked to him for a bit. But he did that, and he came back and we discussed it afterwards. He was like, well, actually, they just weren't very friendly, those two girls I sat near. And he really sort of learned something from that little kind of semi-failure, that I actually then forced him to come and talk to another group of students about it. So it's that feeling like we're going to have these experiences, we're going to learn from each other, and they're not always going to be easy. I'm starting to ramble now, so I'll stop.
No, they're really, really, really interesting, wise words. And actually, I wondered, either Charlotte or Jo, actually, before Ellen speak, maybe we should. There's a few comments in the chat that would be good to think about.
Yeah, definitely. Do you want me to read them out?
Yeah,
Jane?
go on. Yes,
Cool.
please.
So we've got a few comments. So I think it's Suzanne says, one thing to consider is challenges posed in school for young people with I think it might be ASD, linked in with their VI, often an awful lot harder to engage with those sorts of strategies. We've got another comment from Sarah, which is, I think getting schools to recognise that these things are so important as qualifications can be hard. Schools are usually so grade focused. And we had a question which I've now lost. I don't know. It was just a question about is it open to all? Is this trust open to all, or is it just a local thing? I think that's quite.
It is open to all. Obviously, getting to the Lake District, they do run transport. I'm not exactly sure where transport from other areas goes, but
and great minds do think alike, because afterwards we're going to send everyone a list of kind of where in the country there are social groups, because there are sight loss charities that particularly have children and young people services, but also Outlook Trust is one of the ones that I've kind of sent a link for. So it does, it's a good way for our young people to learn independence away from us as well, and have a lot of fun, isn't it?
Can I just say something quickly about the comment about ASC? So I think that the common link there is that you have young people who very likely need to be explicitly taught things that other people pick up without being taught them. So there's quite a lot of overlap in a way of how you would want to address some of these issues with visually impaired, or with students who've got autism as well.
Thank you. Ellen, it kind of quite links, so we're gonna get Ellen to share her she's got a PowerPoint to share with us, and it is about the skills Theo is taught, isn't it, Ellen? And actually it ties into some of these conversations, and then we can get some kind of direct questions, hopefully, for both Laura and Ellen after your bit, Ellen. There you go. Perfect. Yeah.
Go there. Okay, hopefully that's working now. And I'll try and make sure I can see my screen too. Okay, so I'm the mum of a 16-year-old boy, and that's where I'm kind of coming at this, I don't know, little presentation from. And I'm going to focus it on connection, I suppose, social connections. And the reason being that my experience is of my son, who was born blind. He's on the autistic spectrum and he has verbal dyspraxia. So he didn't speak in a way that anyone apart from his family could understand until he was 4. So for us, making social connections was a really big project and something that we thought lots about. And I did lots of research on, and we also got professional help from speech therapists. And that help has continued on through his schooling and through secondary school as well. So I'll share some of the strategies that speech therapists have advised as well for this. But I think it starts with connection, and that's why I've got this photo here. The other reason I like this photo is because it's a photo of 2 boys and they're standing facing each other, and it looks like they're in a playground. And the other reason I put that there is because I'm sighted, and so I've got my ideas about how connections might be made. But these two boys are visually impaired, blind, and they're making a connection. And I don't know if anyone can see from the photo how they're making that connection. But it's that one of the boys has got his foot just slightly overlapping the other boy's foot. And so they are connected and they're just having a chat. They're both having a snack in the playground, but the one foot overlapping the other one is their little connection there. And I think back to that photo sometimes because it reminds me that how I think the connection should be isn't always how it is for my son. So I want to just remember to be led by him and think about how it works for him and what his different ways of connecting positively are. But we all need friends. So I was just going to share some practical things that have helped for us with that. I started with environmental supports, and that's because sometimes I've been made to feel by institutions that my son has been in that it's his job to develop his skills to solve the problem of how difficult friendships can be. And as a parent, that can feel really difficult because you feel like all the responsibility is being put on your child to sort this problem out or this difficulty. So I would like to start with the environmental supports that could be put in around that child. And this doesn't just come from me. So I know we've talked about the curriculum framework for children and young people with VI, which was devised by RNIB and has just come out recently. It's a great little document to pull out if you're trying to encourage school to recognise this, because it talks about accessible social environments being really important in their first one of their 11 areas of intervention. And I will share a link to that document as well. So here we go, things that the environment can be made more helpful for. So already mentioned staff and peer awareness training. I think in terms of friendships, experiential can be helpful. And I know our speech therapist shares a photograph of a group of people playing beach cricket, and then just asks staff to think about how they would join that group as a sighted person, what they might do, what strategies they might use, and then to consider if they couldn't see, how that would be a barrier in terms of their strategies that they would normally use. And that's been really powerful in terms of staff really, being able to empathize a little bit more with how they can support then my son in lessons. The other big thing, apart from and the peer awareness training, I mean, you've already covered that a little bit. If I think my son has spoken sometimes, as he's got older, it's been helpful as well to have an older mentor come in and do that bit about the experience of being a blind individual. And that can be really nice because it takes the focus off him, but it just gives the other students an insight into how, a blind person isn't that difficult to talk to. So again, you could always get a mentor to come in and do that. The other big thing that's really helped is having spaces available that enable social connection in school. So a hectic, noisy playground where people might be connecting through playing basketball or playing ping pong or running around playing football or all those sorts of things, they don't work for somebody who can't see. Well, they never did work for my son. And he's always really, really worried about being hit by a ball or something and all those sorts of things. So having a quieter space available where he can spend time with other young people has really, really helped him. And we've worked with school to enable him to invite other young people into a quiet space that he has, that's his dedicated space in the school. And that's provided an environment where they can sit and fiddle around doing coding projects on their computers and also just chat generally. So working with school on a space is really important. You've talked a little bit about TAs already. I think it's really important if you've got social targets that you make sure the TAs are aware of them, that they see that supporting those targets is part of their role as well as supporting the access to the academic curriculum. And the TAs need support by professionals as well. They need to feel they're not just left with this project, but that they've got someone they can ask about it, a QTVI, a SALT, somebody that can support them. And then also about stepping back. Now that obviously is age appropriate, it's person appropriate, but stepping back, and my son is now at the age where he's starting to say, yeah, please get out of my space now. And that's great. I think they can also, though, have a social scaffolding role. So they can give those little live prompts sometimes, and that can make all the difference. They might see a really good friend of his across the classroom, and they might just say, oh, there's so-and-so over there. And just that little nudge can make all the difference. So giving them the permission and as part of their role to do that little bit of social scaffolding can be really helpful sometimes. Making sure that your child is seated next to a student, even if they have a TA next to them, there's always got to be a student on the other side. And you know what, I say it till I'm blue in the face and I keep saying it, so just keep saying it. We've also helpful to consider the different parts of the school day. So maybe how can we help with form time? And there it's useful to link in with form tutors. That's in secondary. What can be done at lunchtime? Just look at the different times of the day. During lessons, one of those things that seems to have been a challenge is, oh, find a partner or make a small group. And just if teachers included in their hopefully annual awareness training on including your child, if that can be flagged up, that please could they put the children into groups. Don't just draw your child out and say, okay, and oh, and you can go with so-and-so, but do that bit for the whole class. Don't make them feel left out. That can be helpful too. The idea of having a class list, knowing who's in your lessons, and having a set seating plan also really helps because it gives the VI student a chance to get to know who's around them. My son's had really, really close friends in lessons, and he hasn't even known. 3 months down the line, he's gone, oh, I had no idea George was in my maths class because he was sitting at the back. So it's little things like that can make all the difference as well. Supporting independence, you already brought it up, and I totally agree. I think that every little bit of independence that you can give someone will help to support friendship building. If you can walk to lunch with a peer, not a TA, it's possible that you'll go in and get your lunch together and go and sit down together. The enabling participation in extracurricular, that's all part of being part of the wider school community. And that's got to fit with what the student's interested in, obviously, but then you can find people who are in your little tribe. You can connect with them, and that's a really good basis for starting to develop friendships. And then one of the things that's helped us to keep a focus on this, even in a school where academic is really number one, is having a regular meeting where everyone involved in the team around the child, including at management level, and the student for part of that meeting, but not the whole meeting, is held. It's held every half term, and the agenda is only on social and emotional issues. And that is really powerful because it makes everyone think about what they can do for that. So that's the environmentals, just some ideas of what we've done on the environmental stuff. Then there's looking at, well, what tools can you help your child develop to give them some tools around this. I put mobility skills first because I do think it really, really helps. It certainly has helped my son being able to move around school independently and obviously around the world independently in terms of becoming less socially isolated. It's already, Laura's said the bit about, you know, this area is one that needs to be taught explicitly for somebody who hasn't got vision, because so many of these things are learnt through visual cues and feedback. So again, you need to be really explicit. And that's why I sort of think about it in a framework, and I'll share the little areas that I think about it in, which help to target interventions and also see where are the biggest gaps for my child and what do I want to focus on, because it's sometimes it feels like a lot. Having a specialist professional to lead has been really helpful for us. And again, the curriculum framework for children and young people with VI mentions that a speech and language therapist should be involved in supporting this. So raise it when you're talking at review meetings about this as an area of need. And they can also work with QTVIs who can also really help with supporting this. And I've just put tactile resources are helpful. I'll show you some photos of some little bits and pieces that we've used as well. So the first area that I've broken down that kind of development of skills around this into is emotional development. That's looking at the concept of yourself in relation to others, understanding your feelings, all that sort of thing. And this is different at different ages. And also understanding that social interaction can be tiring. This is particularly the case for my son, and that he does need to have downtime in a quiet space for his own regulation, and then he can go back out and use to get going with the social interaction again. The other next area is actually that just communication. Now for us early on, that was verbal very much that we were focusing on, but also you've got to understand gestures. Here I am waving my hands in the air, but if you can't see that, you don't know that that's one way that people communicate. And the other ways with things like body language. If you are all closed up and your head is down and maybe your head's on the desk, he would often have his head on the desk, and then he was wondering why the teacher didn't pick him to answer a question. It was his body language. So posture is communication. We were given some really good advice by a totally blind, very successful adult. He's a very, very good communicator. And he said, I use my magnetism to get people's attention. And this really resonated with my son, because I was saying, well, I use my eye contact, how do you do it? And he just was really still. And he just said, I just sit still, I have my face up, and I just use my magnetism. And you know what? My son went off and tried it in restaurants and everything. It works every time, always gets the waiter's attention with his magnetism. So that's some communication stuff. Then there's social cognition. That's just basically understanding the social landscape, which is tricky. So, sometimes people say, oh, go with your friend or do this with your friend. And I know, particularly when my son was younger, I think that concept of what is a friend was quite difficult. So we looked at the relationships around him. So there was him, and then there was his family, and then there was his close friends. And then, so we had to discuss that explicitly. Also thinking about emotions and being really explicit around that. We used role play and we used social stories to understand what was going on around socially, as well as really being explicit around social rules. And that's something that the TAs can really support with in class, where they can help in terms of giving an idea of what is the social landscape around you, what's happening right now. Social interaction, that's the next one. So that was the social landscape. Now, this is the bit that we probably often think is the only bit of this jigsaw, the social interaction bit. This is the skills used to initiate, maintain, and end interactions. They're verbal or non-verbal. It can be either. And then the ability to interact in varied contexts with varied partners. And that includes your participation in things, your body language, imitation, repairing communications. That's where a sort of conversation just grinds to a halt. What can you do at that point to get it restarted? And those are things that we would talk about, little ideas with a speech therapist. We would make sure his TA team know about those little ideas, and then they can prompt and he can have a go. And then we would review maybe at the end of the day. Oh, did you have a go at any of those things? And if I notice him doing that at home with other young people or just others, I'll say, oh, I loved how you did that. I noticed how you picked up on that person's what they were talking about, and you asked them a question about it. And that really helped the conversation to carry on. And just doing those little bits of positive feedback do seem to have helped him to build his skills around this. Another one is for to just give him, to warn him really that sometimes he needs to be prepared to be the social initiator. Seems like quite a few sighted people are a little bit intimidated by the blind person sitting next to them. Oh, what do I say? So as the blind person, you might need to be prepared to just go for it. And you can work on little scripts for that. What might you say? What are some conversation starters? And having a little raft of those in your head and trying them out has been really helpful for us. He's also got this little thing of being a detective and finding out from somebody, what are your shared interests? What can I find out that we're both interested in? And like a little personal detective game. And often a dog is a good place to start because his buddy dog is obviously a good shared interest. So This is one of the little resources we used about conversations. It's Conversation Diamond, and it's just tactile. So it's thinking about the shape of a conversation, how it's got a start, a middly bit, and an end. And those bits can be of different sizes. So it might just be a really quick conversation in the corridor, in which case you might have just a start and an end. Hi, see you. And there's no middly bit, you know. And just understanding how conversations can be different in that way and doing it tactilely has been really helpful. And then we can relate back, we can just verbally reflect back on that. And that's a little shared interests thing we made, a tactile Venn diagram, and then he'd put the shared interest that he'd identify in the middle, and then he'd think about how he might be able to use that in terms of keeping conversations going, or a conversation starter with a particular person. Now, these you can just have a look at later. There's some EHCP outcomes that are in his EHCP, just to give you some idea of the sorts of things we've put in there for his age and stage. You'll have your own things for your young person. And this is the document that's the framework that I mentioned. So you can use that link too. And we have long-term outcomes and we have short-term outcomes in our EHCP. Some people do, some people don't. But you know, you can see things like have the skills to communicate positively with peers in unstructured social situations. It's in there. It gets discussed at the review meetings. It just means it's part of the discussion and part of what school can also understand as being part of his education. So just some final thoughts on top interventions then for us, that have been for us. So having these regular direct sessions with a speech and language therapist leading have been really, really helpful for us. We don't have them very often. We might have maybe 2 every term, and that's not every term either, but even that has been really helpful. There's been dedicated time to think about this area. Joint working with the whole team, and then this half-termly meeting has been really helpful as well. Again, another meeting, but the weekly parental meetings that I have with the TAs, the SENCO and the QTVI, that's where we pick up things, that's where we keep things moving. Things don't become a big issue, we can pick up little things and we can just have a chat, and we can all think about how we can, from our different places where we're all working, we can work together on it. Starting from where the student is, identifying shared interests with other students, starting from their interests, and then the team developing a club for a small group of young people based on that interest, rather than trying to stick him into something else to build something around what his and his friends' interests appeared to be. So this was kind of computing stuff for Theo. Developing an understanding of social and cultural reference points. What does that mean? That just means trying as a parent to help him understand at different ages, what are they talking about when they talk about Minecraft? All those sorts of things. Or if there's a really popular film, then trying to watch it at home with audio description, or just trying to help him be a bit more plugged in to whatever the references are of his peers around him. Extracurricular activities have been really helpful in terms of building and developing friendships. Duke of Edinburgh, where you're meeting those young people in a different context, and that's been really wonderful. And musical events have helped in that way too. The other thing I just wanted to sort of touch on, which has really helped in terms of self-esteem and skills, is connecting with VI peers outside of school. That's both remotely and in person. I think it's really built his confidence. And the other thing around that too is connecting with mentors. Now, that's not just those mentors with blind lived experience, although it is them as well, but also mentors who are mentors around interest areas, whether that's music or technology. That's really helped in terms of making connections with people, which I think this is what this is all about. Positive self-esteem as a parent, helping to develop your young person's positive self-esteem any way that works for them. That might be a sport, a hobby, whatever it is that works for them. I often feel quite powerless in this area, in the friendship area, and I feel like, oh, what can I do some days? And just thinking to myself, okay, well, what I can do is help with the self-esteem bit. That helps me too. And thinking also about connecting with people positively. It doesn't have to be peers in school. And if at the moment peers in school is really difficult, then looking at how you can connect with other people positively and fostering those kind of positive connections, all that will build up skills and confidence in this area. And then I think I just wanted to say, to remember to look after yourself, because it can be really tough sometimes, this area as a parent. It can be really emotionally hard, and coming to groups like this can be really helpful. But yeah, just remember that, and give yourself a little bit of looking after in this area too. And my last bit is just, sometimes you're just the safe harbor, and that's what you can do. And that can be a really big intervention for your child if they just need to come home and they just need to have a safe harbor to regroup and just have some downtime from it all. That's really important too, I think.
Thank you, Ellen. You had, there's some comments about how amazing these resources are. So they are. So thank you so much. And one thing I was reflecting on, because we've just had half term, and Chloe has one real friend from her mainstream school that she still meets up with, and her mum and I were talking. They actually went into town this holiday, which was amazing, but we walked behind them, and then they made their way to a cafe, and then we left them, and 2 hours later, this is the first time this has ever happened, we met up again, but they didn't need our support. It was amazing. But the mum and I were talking, and she said, to be honest, Jane, it was you, because I don't think Chloe or this friend would have connected. They're both really rubbish on their phones. They're both very immediate. They just, they liked each other. So it was kind of, I set up play dates, even though my daughter is now 14, just kept the relationship going. And I think sometimes we have to do that, don't we? Because it's what our children need, but then it can blossom as well. So apparently they keep in touch over WhatsApp, which is also a revelation. But thank you. It wonderful information and resources. So now we're going to open it up. So if you'd like to ask either Laura or Ellen any questions about what we've just talked about, or reflect yourself on your situation, your child's situation, write it in chat or put your hand up and we'll kind of respond if you like to.
There's a couple of questions actually, Jane.
Brilliant.
Such great ideas, Ellen, so thank you. And do you think Theo would still fit the criteria for being offered SALT if he didn't have verbal dyspraxia? That's a question.
I don't think he would fit the criteria. In fact, I know he wouldn't fit the criteria unless he had a dual diagnosis with ASD as well.
Okay, thank you. We've also had these resources are blooming incredible, Ellen. And I feel every child should be taught these skills. This is really fantastic advice. I am feeling if only I'd had a mainstream school willing to work with me on these things. Sadly, I now have a child out of education. And just, this is all amazing. Yeah, really nice comments.
Laura, have you got any advice about that? Because I think that's what often as parents we find, that we're trying to raise it. We're trying to say that this is a big gap. Our children are isolated. I found out that my daughter was crying in the toilets, and I only knew because one of her kind of friends told her mum, who told me. But she had one-to-one support, but somehow the whole message was, leave her to it. She's whatever age now. But our kids just can't, they can't find their friends at break. They can't, communicate in the same way. They don't know how to instigate. And sometimes I think, in terms of what Ellen was saying about cultural references, their friends suddenly leap forward as well in terms of kind of maturity and things that they're interested in. So yeah, have you got any reflection? Wise words for us?
Probably not wise words, no. I think it's just very, very common. It's not it's to be expected, and we have to plan for what we're going to do to kind of support them to learn the things that they need to learn, and to be aware, like that sort of, you shouldn't be finding out by accident, should you, that something like that is going on. So whether it's a regular key worker mentor that checks in with them at school, or as you said, sort of the level of training and skills of the TA, which, you know, isn't always there or isn't always consistently there. And just that pushing all the time with schools that we want to prioritize the future life, the adult that we want our young people to become, not the quickest way to finish this worksheet in this lesson. So it's kind of, I don't know, I don't have a really good answer to that, because it's kind of persistent, reminding, continually developing, looking at where we want them to go next. And there isn't a kind of one size fits all to that.
And do you have those conversations at the annual reviews or the team around the family meetings, or?
Absolutely, yes, at annual reviews, but I think it has more impact if you're doing it in your staff training. So if you can get your QTVI in to speak to the whole staff, and, you know, things like if students don't want to participate in that, I do sort of little videos, interview them before the staff training, and get them to get the staff to listen to their perspective on things directly, and just really working on that empathy as well, where, I mean, a big issue for me at the moment seems to be students rejecting their access, you know, their best means of working, and really trying to get staff to understand why that's happening and how they're feeling, is a kind of an ongoing, because in fact as well with secondary schools, even if you got it completely understood by everyone, in 6 months' time somebody's changed jobs, they've moved sets, that, you know, there's been a new rotation in technology. So even if you did it, you've got to do it again the next year, or, you know, even more often than that. And don't get us started on cover teachers.
Oh, but it's great to hear how supportive and how as a service you drive it though as well. It's really good for parents to know that it is an existence. And do you think the curriculum framework will help, you know, you as a workforce with it kind of a bit more, keeping the focus? And
Yeah, I do, and I feel terrible to admit that I still have not sat down and properly gone through it myself. And, you know, whenever I've looked at it, I've gone, oh yeah, that's really, oh, and a lot of it just is, you recognize it because it's what you're already doing, but it's a lovely structure and it kind of formalizes it. But if I'm really honest, the way working life is, I haven't kind of married up the two properly yet in my practice.
yeah, I'm going to the VIEW conference, so I'm sure there'll be lots of conversations around that as well. Is there anything else, Jo, that you'd like to reflect before we hear from the mentors?
No, just really positive stuff for Ellen. Lots of parents are going to use your advice, Ellen, so thank you for that. Yeah, and they're going to make things priorities in the EHCP.
Yeah, there's so things that could have been done, but they'll be using it going forward. So we'll make sure, obviously, that we share Ellen's resources. And Laura, if you've got anything else that you can put to paper, and then we'll share it with everybody as well. But it's just so good to have a member, a QTVI come and speak to us. So thank you.
Jane, Anthea put a question about recommendations for moving to a mainstream education, but maybe that's going to be dealt with a bit by the mentors as well.
I don't know, because that Laura might be able to answer that. I don't know. What would you recommend when moving to a mainstream further education establishment? I
suppose it's the same things. It depends where you're going and what the support there looks like as well. So the further education settings that we have in our locality, we would do broadly similar things as we would do at a transition within school years, but then step back considerably more. And I think there is less input and less support from QTVIs in further education settings. Some colleges in some areas have a QTVI based in the college, but a lot of them don't. And the kind of level of awareness and experience and expertise, I think, yeah, the main thing that we do is around the annual review for transition and initial training and advice. And then there isn't that much input from our team in further education. Sadly, there should be, but there isn't the capacity to do it.
So Nick, I've just seen, have you seen that next message, Joe?
Yeah, I was just about to say, what about for someone who has missed out totally through mainstream and isn't going to further education? Where do they get help?
Is that question to me?
I don't know who would ever want to, who wants to ask that one. Answer that one.
Nikki's question. I guess, would it be things like the outlet, places where, I don't know, for socializing with peers? It depends. Yeah. Nikki, do you want to say any more? You might not want to, but
Unmute. Hi, yes, very quickly. Although we don't have any HCP because we're in Wales, and we don't have an IDP because they haven't mandated for anyone who's over 16. So although our daughter is 19, and she has no way of accessing any of that. But that aside, even if she did have an IDP, when you leave education, it is still part of your transition plan, whether you go on to education or you go on to independent life. And it's about that still, that transition is still held through QTVI school and all of those things. So it needs to be thought of what happens then, doesn't it? If that young person still needs that support, where is that coming from, and how can that be informed to the family and to anyone else who is supporting them?
yeah.
I don't know if a habilitation worker at that point would ever cover some of those areas.
Ours only does mobility. They don't cover anything else here, but that may differ in different areas.
Yeah, and I guess it's finding out locally, because I know that when we thought about this before, when Chloe was really struggling, she found a youth club that was for kind of children of kind of up to 25 of different disabilities, but that was somewhere where she didn't feel she felt she could be herself. So, but I know you live quite remotely, don't you, Nikki? So that's not always easy to find either.
No, we've got direct payment. So Rihanna is getting the ability to travel a little bit of different distance, but obviously with having ME, that restricts that. But it's more the fact that nobody seems to know. Her social worker doesn't know, no one else. There just seems to be a lack of that. I don't think anyone's really thought of it, particularly, as you say, there's still a lot of us where this hasn't happened during education. So we're talking about it because so many people want to know. But I think there's then that situation of where it's either not quite hit the mark, or in our situation, whereas it hasn't hit the mark at all. What then? Because they're then going into, the wider world without those skills, and where are they going to get those skills, help to get those skills, I suppose.
It's a gap that we can raise, Nikki, definitely. We've got it, Sarah and Imogen. Imogen is one of our amazing mentors with their hands up. Sarah, would you like to go first?
I was just going to say that we're in the position where we have speech therapy at the moment, but my son is not going to be provided with it. He's 20. Moving forward through his EHC plan to do with actually the placement he's moving to, but it's the same thing. But anyway, we are pursuing through our GP a referral for speech therapy. Now, whether or not Nikki's daughter Rihanna would qualify for that or not, I don't know, but it might be another avenue just to at least ask if you haven't tried it yet, Nikki.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. For our son, yes, because he's autistic, although he's just passed his driving test today. Hooray. Sorry.
Brilliant.
But no, she doesn't come under speech and therapy, speech and language, because that's something that she's actually quite good at. In terms of speaking, it's communication, two-way communication, and all of the things that Ellen was sort of running through, that, you know, she can say all the right words but has no way of communicating that way in a two-way. She can monologue very well but has no cues of how to sort of match all of those other things. So it's about how to do that for, you know, for an older young person, I guess. And who would do that?
Just to say that speech therapy obviously doesn't need to be just about the way that you speak. It can be more about your ability to socially speak, because my son can pronounce words perfectly well. He can monologue, he can have a one-to-one conversation with an adult about his chosen interests. So I don't know if we're going to be successful either, but I don't know, maybe it's worth a punt.
Yeah, we'll try, but as you will be aware now, with 20 being at 20, is they just get thrown out of the children's sort of paediatrician and all of those sort of services and sort of in our part of the world into a black hole. That's our problem and we need to find it. I just wanted to highlight it rather than grumble about our situation, that actually everything that we're saying is relevant, but I also think future-proofing the EHCP so that when they leave education, there is still some pathway to getting that sort of support. And as you say, if it's a gap, it's one that needs to be highlighted. But also, if you have somewhere, you're lucky enough to be in an area where there is support, it's not forgetting to keep that support in place, you know, moving forward.
Thank you. So we've had some advice from Sacha. So yeah, so hopefully Sacha, you can answer it in the chat as well, because I'm very aware that Imogen's had her hand up. Imogen, what wise words have you got to add?
I don't know if I'd call them wise, but basically I can relate based on the ASD side of things, and on, you know, what happens after you leave secondary school, because we found that we had so much support in secondary school. When I went into college or uni, unless we really fought for it, it didn't happen overnight. Kind of when I was there, I was lucky because I've had the same rehabilitation officer in terms of, you know, training me how to use my cane, or even what word to use, since I was 4. She took it upon herself to train me and orientate me around the site, because they just weren't putting in the funding in terms of council, because I was going across boroughs. And going from on the ASC side of things, my brother, he's autistic, and we found that as soon as he's got cerebral palsy down one side of his body, so obviously one side's weaker than the other, and we found that we had to quite expensively get somebody to come and train him every week, because otherwise he'd lose all function in that one side. And now he's brilliant and he does, you know, lifting weights and everything else like that. But I find there's definitely a gap, and it is a struggle, because you're kind of under the impression it's almost like councils and boroughs decide that when you're no longer in school, your issue is no longer an issue, which isn't true, because oddly enough, the issue that we've got is with us for life. And it's mainly how we manage it, and having to put coping mechanisms and structures up, so we build a framework so that when we come up to these difficulties, it makes us more resilient. When I was training around colleges and stuff, I had the support team build a tactile map for me that I could trace along my finger in order to get orientated around, so I can then kind of picture it in my mind as I was walking around. Then I'd feel the corresponding piece of paper which had the tactile markings on them. They used felt, or they used graph paper, which you can get on the RNIB, that raised up when you put pressure to it. So that I found those really, really helpful, and they were quite they weren't expensive at all to get a hold of, and it's just simple tools like that which I found made a real difference.
Brilliant. You're such a star. So if everyone's happy, I don't know if there's been any other questions, Joe, before we move on. Probably finding the unmute button. Yeah, so thank you very much, Laura and Ellen, for your bit. I know you're staying on for a while, and we're now going to move to the two amazing mentors with their lived experience. Both Eliza and Imogen are relatively new mentors. So Eliza's just started a degree, so you haven't got a mentee yet, have you? But you're kind of well into the Look family and have agreed to come and share your experiences. And Imogen's going to talk to you. She's got a couple of mentees who she talks to about friendship. So Eliza, do you want to just introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi everyone, I'm Eliza. I'm quite new to Look. I joined last year, sort of summertime, after finishing sixth form. I just wanted something to do. I think, what is it? Do you want me to start talking about friendship?
No, that's fine. Just how old you are, and then I'll ask you the questions if you like, and where you're studying.
Yeah, sure. So I'm 18, going to be 19 next week, which is kind of scary, but there we go.
And what eye condition do you have? Because we're always fascinated as parents about
Yeah, so I was born with Leber's congenital amaurosis, so it's not one that many people would have heard of. It's one of the really, really rare ones. I did have some peripheral vision up until the age of 16, which I was very fortunate to have, left, because, my parents did a lot of research. For them, it was quite devastating to find out about my vision impairment. We've got nobody in the family who's visually impaired. So I went to Ireland and had stem cell therapy done when I was very young. But then the age of 16, during like the COVID pandemic time, my vision started to become very blurry. So the little bit of peripheral vision I did have, it's, kind of gone away. And I only sort of now have light perception, and I see these flashing firework sort of lights. It's very hard to explain to somebody who doesn't see them, but apparently it does happen to people with retinal conditions and whose sight does deteriorate over time.
So you started a degree course. Where are you studying, and what are you studying?
So I've started at Brunel, and I'm doing a bachelor's in English and creative writing. Brilliant. With a foundation year.
Brilliant. Honestly, it's so lovely that you wanted to come and chat to us. So I have got some questions just because it's a bit easier. So my first one is, how easy did you find making friends as you were growing up?
I would say that with friends, I did have two really good girlfriends in primary school who, they never treated me as if I were different. You know, they would hold hands with me and we'd go play like any normal child. And I used to take things out in the playground. For example, I used to have those scented pens that you can get off of RNIB. And everybody used to crowd around the bench. I remember saying, can we smell them? And, you know, kind of that idea. Taking out a ball with a bell inside it. And then I remember kind of playing football, basketball, cricket with the boys. And it was so funny because all the girls, they used to go near the football pitches, the boys used to push them off and say, just, you know, go away. But with me, they used to include me, and it was fun being, you know, made to feel that I do belong. Not to say that I was sort of bullied in year 5, year 6 by a girl. You know, being nasty and being a little bit intimidating, and that bullying did follow in year 7, unfortunately, which made me realize that I know it's not a nice thing that happens. And I found out that my secondary school had an anti-bullying team, and I became a member of that. Because I feel that no person should be bullied, whether you have a disability or not. It's, you know, it affects one's self-esteem, self-confidence. And I also was a prefect, which, you know, made me feel that I can take part in roles that are meant for sighted people. And I may not have actually been with other people. I was on duty. I remember my head of inclusion, she was really, really good in secondary school. And, you know, I had a very close relationship with her. I'd do duties with her, the hall duties, and, you know, it made me realize how busy it can be and how intimidating it can be to be around lots and lots of people, but the vibe feels really good at the same time.
So having responsibility, both, I think that's amazing that you were an anti-bullying ambassador and a prefect. So they both, that helped you at school, I guess, and having a bit of responsibility was good.
Yeah, I think it's so important to feel like you're not different. Yet I get that we do, because we have a vision impairment, but, you know, being made feel that you do belong really does affect, you know, your self-esteem, your self-confidence, and you kind of learn to grow and you learn to explore different avenues and open doors for yourself.
Brilliant. So what strategy, so those are some strategies. Are you aware of other things that you used school, and maybe now you started at university, are there things that you, because we were talking about how awkward it is and kind of to initiate conversation, and Ellen has got all these wonderful kind of ideas and things to help Theo, but have you used anything like Ellen was talking about?
Not particularly. I remember when you start school at the beginning of every year, from primary to secondary, you do a whole introductory assembly, and I'm sure many people who are listening right now might agree, where you kind of do an introduction of, say, who you are, what you do, and you kind of give them a bit of an insight into the equipment. So you kind of show them how to use a cane, how to do sighted guide, and I was the only one in the class who had somebody sitting next to me like a TA, and using a Perkins brailler. So I think making tools sort of prominent, I think it's really important, because it means that you don't have to physically say, I am, you know, blind or partially sighted. People can see for themselves that this is how you work, and that's what I do at uni. I have my Braille note touch out, I have my Mac on with my voiceover software, so that they are aware that this is what I need.
Yeah, so they're aware without you having to kind of discuss it necessarily, I guess.
I mean, I've never been asked yet at uni about my vision impairment, although there was one incident which I stood up for myself. I was actually at the IT desk getting my equipment connected to the Wi-Fi a couple of weeks ago, and a girl in the queue behind me said, "Oh, is somebody like you actually at university?" I thought, just because I am visually impaired doesn't mean that I can't have an access to an education. You know, it makes me no different, because I think a perception that a lot of the able-bodied community has is that when you have any sort of disability, you're supposed to be locked away, segregated, you don't fit in with mainstream society, and you basically don't have a life in very, very dull terms. And I think being able to go into a mainstream environment like a university, like a college, it kind of opens the eyes of people who aren't disabled.
And you'd hope nowadays that those kind of views are, you know, have slightly dissipated, but sadly not. So how did you just stand up for yourself?
Yeah, I said, well, I have a right to an education. You know, I can still live a life. You know, just because I have a vision impairment doesn't change anything, I think.
Brilliant. And are you enjoying your course?
Yeah, I am. Obviously, I've had a few accessibility issues along the way. And again, it comes down to, again, I don't know if this would help with this support group in any way, but when you move into university, you lose the EHCP plan that you have at school. So it's all starting from scratch to put all your needs down via DSA, having that, you know, 2-hour-long assessment, and then doing the same thing at uni. Whereas if you have that one support plan, you know exactly what's on that plan. You don't have to redo everything from scratch.
Brilliant. And how are you finding that whole start again? And have you got any tips that you're going to kind of use to build a community at university, do you think? I think starting from scratch has taught me that I need to be able to advocate a lot more for myself. I know I still need the support, because I think when you do have a disability of any sort, you do have parts of you that are vulnerable and you need that help. But also it allows you to grow and allows you to express your needs. And I think I picked up a lot from listening to QTVIs over the years of my annual review meetings. I've picked up a lot of strategies they use to help me to advocate. And I feel like some of those strategies could have been applied to university, but sadly they weren't. Well, do you know what, like a lot of the people that we meet through Look, I'm sure that your experiences you'll use to change things for others in the future. We had last time we had a chat, it was exam provision, and one of the mentors, Lara, kind of just said, "Oh, I've changed things for future BI students who go to Oxford." So, you know, every struggle becomes kind of somebody out, you know, you're paving the way for other people, aren't you? But anybody would be lucky to have you as a friend. Someone's just put, could you share some self-advocacy strategies via email? Would that be possible? Yes, so yeah, that would be amazing, because it's just good to that it's amazing that you stood up for yourself. So thank you. And hopefully Jess being part of the mentor team, you're building a new community as well, which is fantastic. I think with that, I think when I was going through my vision deterioration, I found it really difficult to ask for help and admit that I needed help. You know, I knew inside that there were some days where I wasn't coping as well. I think through mentoring, I want to be able to help people who were in my situation. I don't want them to go through that darkness that I did, in a way, even though I had real good support networks around me. Well, Jess coming and talking to us and hearing how you were bullied, but you've overcome that, and all the things that you've done is amazing. So thank you. So I will move on to Imogen, and then if people can ask both of you some questions afterwards. So are you happy? Are you ready to chat, Imogen?
Yeah, more than happy to chat.
Brilliant. So can you do a little introduction about how old you are and kind of your situation at the moment in terms of work? And
So I'm Imogen. I'm 24. I currently work as a canine rehabilitation specialist, which basically means that I get to play with dogs all day as part of my living. I swim dogs. I'm a canine hydrotherapist and canine massage therapist. I run. I work as part of the vet. So there's only one hydrotherapy treadmill there. And I manage about 60 cases a week, so it's quite intense. But I love what I do. I really, really enjoy it. I've got my eye condition is retinopathy of prematurity. I was born at 24 weeks. I am the third disabled child in my household, all of which my older brothers have disabilities, but none of which are connected. And they've all got individual disabilities. Yeah, really, I suppose that's about it. I've got, well, technically a buddy dog. She's not that by term. She's a mental wellness dog. She's an ESA dog. Her name is Purdy. She comes with me absolutely everywhere, including work. And I suppose she's got more separation anxiety from the other, me or her. But she's a brilliant dog, and I love her to pieces. So yeah.
Brilliant. I'm going to share with everyone a photograph of Purdy. She's very cute after the session. So I've got my questions then. So the first one is, how easy did you find making friends as you were growing up?
So making friends was always a struggle for me personally. I was in primary school, I probably had one friend. In secondary school, kind of upgraded to two. And I didn't like big crowds. I didn't like loud noises. I very much kept myself to myself. I mean, don't get me wrong, the school did try to get me friends, but the more they tried, the more I wasn't really for it. And basically my vision is I've got minimal to no vision in my left eye and about 20% remaining in my right. And it's been like that more or less my whole life. But so basically finding friends when they all look identical wearing the same school uniform was very much a challenge. And when it was suggested that they wear red sashes on them to help me indicate them in the playground, it wasn't really a forthcoming motive which my classmates wanted to adopt. Let's just say it like that. They didn't want to do it. So it's kind of like a forced buddy system, which I really struggled with. Because a lot of they'd often pick, my class would often, well, the teachers often pick the most outgoing kids to kind of help me boost my confidence, and I could see from that point of view. However, I didn't want, the outgoing were too loud and too noisy. However, that did all change when I got to college and found I've got very interested in animals, and I really wanted to be a vet when I was younger. So my grandfather founded Atmore Vets. It was like a company. I couldn't also be a vet. I couldn't see. It's kind of a bit of a plot hole in my veterinary discovery. You can't see to put needles in or veins in. So I went on, did an animal management course, which I absolutely loved. I lived in assisted living on halls on site, and it was a lot better. And I did find friends, and we all lived together. So we had to kind of become quite close quite quickly. And we did, and there still remains to be my best friends. There's about 5 of us, me included, and it was really, really nice. Going from there on to university, because I've got a degree in canine therapy, I found the halls experience different than to one I had previously. It wasn't fantastic. It did get better towards the end of my 3 years. I was bullied in my first year in halls, and I often didn't tell family members about it, because obviously uni is very much hyped up when you're younger that it's the best time of your years, and for me it wasn't. I luckily in that respect, when I was being bullied, lockdown happened, so I got to come home, and that kind of worked out pretty well. And obviously when the school, well, uni even, I didn't even tell them. They weren't even, well, they became aware when they noticed it. And they were like, well, what do you want to do with the case? Do you want to go through disciplinary action? And I said, well, you could do, but that means if you go through it, I've also got to go through it because I've got to make it fair. And I was like, I don't want to do that. I just want this person to kind of back off. But this person didn't like the fact that I couldn't see. I think she was jealous of it, which sounds really strange, but I don't think she liked because I had a lot of equipment because of my vision, so I needed access and stuff, and she didn't, and she was normal labelled and everything, and nothing was wrong, but that was her issue, not mine. So yeah, lockdown happened, and now I work full time, and work have been very accommodating with my needs. They don't like it when I leave the screen zoomed in times 400 on the magnification software. They get a bit like, I can't see the screen. I was like, why? It's not big enough. So then I have to teach them how to get it back into what they view to be normal mode. And all the fact that I leave my speech software on, and they scares them to death because I starts chatting to them about the screen. They don't know quite what's going on. But yeah.
It sounds like you kind of cope with life as well with sense of humor, which maybe we all need. So do you think that's a strategy?
I've been told that a lot.
So you use what other strategies do you use?
I use humor. Yeah, so I obviously, call it coping mechanism or whatever you want to call it. I use humor as a form of, as an outlet, because obviously, like, being visually impaired and everything can be a little bit kind of like people automatically, well, I don't know, but some people have the perception of, as it was said previous, that if you're visually impaired or have a disability, you can't do anything, or like suddenly your life is badder than everybody else's. And that is not the case. Life, I believe, is what you make out to be. And I couldn't be a vet, for example. That did get me down, but I'm, now loving my job. I picked a speciality of mine, one hydrotherapy and one massage therapy, both of which are very tactile occupations. And, I did extremely well in my massage course because my senses are heightened. My sense of touch, I can feel muscle fibers, which other people can't. I can, know about compressions and feel the tissue in the muscle decreasing before anybody else, because my senses are heightened. And particularly within hydrotherapy, when a dog, for reference, hydrotherapy is where I put a dog in a pool and I hold on to them and they swim, or in an underwater treadmill in this case, which is basically just a glass tank. I'm lucky in the fact that the operations of that tank, one, it's all large print. Two, each one of them has coloured borders around the individual thing I'm changing. And three, it's all push buttons. So it's all tactile, which I find immensely helpful as I'm running it. And a lot of my clients and patients, so to speak, don't know I can't see because I don't bring it up. And all of they see is my sheets that are large print, obviously it's size 28 font. But apart from that, they don't know. Other coping mechanisms, so to speak, I use music quite a lot. If I have something to distract me, I'm a lot easier to work with. I also found that walking, I don't know if you get this, but you have a lot of teenagers who walk around with the headphones in at full volume and don't listen at all to the road and the environment around them. I found bone conducting headphones by Aftershock a brilliant way to combat that, because it leaves your ear canals free, but you can still listen to music, so it's a more safe alternative.
So that's we had a chat recently on the parent WhatsApp group about earphones. So that's very helpful. Have you, one thing I want to ask both of you actually, so you can answer first, Imogen. What advice would you give to vision impaired children and young people who are feeling isolated and not connecting?
if children are feeling isolated and struggling to connect, I would first look at what they're interested in, and then I would see if, for example, I wanted to start crocheting at school, and I really struggled. Obviously, the practical element of crocheting, you know, it helps when you need sight. So it was kind of brought up in my tutor base, not necessarily but as, you know, potential task for people to do, because one, it's quite a relaxing hobby, it's a therapeutic one, and it's achieves accomplishment. And so they end up setting up groups and just picking interests with groups, and be it gaming or coding is a similar aspect, because quite often if you're interested in, you know, one thing, be it gaming, there's going to be a lot of people who have quite similar interests. And yeah, at times it can be like you feel like you're the only one with that interest, but that is so not the case. Like there's, you know, 7 billion people out there, and within that you've got schools, and within that there are loads of people you've got similar interests of you, because obviously you're at that life stage where you have a similar interest.
Brilliant, thank you. And Eliza, have you got anything else to add to that?
I think following on from Imogen's point, I think if you can't find any support in the school, you know, as tough as that sounds, I think the most important thing is to get involved with, you know, charities and societies who do social events like Lurk or RSBC, who do a lot of events like that, and you get to meet people of your own you know, needs. And I think through that, if you kind of talk about the issues that you're having, you can get advice and maybe apply those strategies when you're in a mainstream environment.
Brilliant, thank you. And have either of you got any top tips for parents? Because I don't know, we haven't asked how your parents supported you with this, but Eliza, you can go first. So have you got things that you can reflect on that your parents helped you, or you would advise us as parents?
I think don't limit your child on what they can and can't do. That's what I loved about my parents. They never said no to anything, because, you know, you're not going to know until you find out, you know, even if it's a dangerous sport, say. And as hard as this sounds, like if you fall down, you're not going to know what it's like to do something. So always try it, even when it seems impossible, because you can always adapt.
Thank you. Well, I know Ellen's son Theo was going down black ski runs this half term, so yeah, I think, yeah, you're right, kind of being able to let our children go and experience things that they really want is important. Imogen, have you got tips for parents?
I would just say that having a child visually impaired, it's very easy to kind of want out to protect them all the time, because it's a natural instinct of the mum or father and stuff. But if you give them the tools they need to be independent in the sense, and I it's difficult because I being one of 3 disabled children, obviously all different disabilities, there wasn't a lot of option. But I found that growing up, having the freedom to kind of express what I felt without feeling that I was going to get judged for it, or even that being able to get around freely on the bus and everything else like that. My mum knew where I was all the time because she tracked on my phone, which I was fine with, because obviously there's some situations where I'd end up getting stranded or get on the wrong bus or something. But it was just having the freedom to decide what I wanted to do, and without the restriction of being told, no, or if I was told no, there had to be a good reason for it, a reason. But my mum has always pushed me to do things. For example, I was upset that I couldn't drive a car, because I know quite a lot, at the age of 16, even now, a lot of people's friends pass the driving test. That obviously wasn't a situation that I could do, because I can't see to. So my mum said, okay, fine, well, do you want to go jump out of the plane? Now I can tell you, falling 10,000 feet, for record, it was a tandem one, I wasn't on my own. You can't really do much about that. You can definitely feel the wind for your trainers, but you know, that was it. And it was because, like, you know, and she was like, well, everyone's driving a car now, no one can say they jumped out of a plane on the weekend. Like, it was just a way of looking at it, way kind of flipping it around. So it was a positive association with the topic rather than a negative one. You know, and it was just kind of having those insights of life, saying it's very easy to kind of dwell on the more challenging aspects of our disability than it is to focus on the positives. I know for a fact that being BI, my hearing is heightened, as annoying as that can be sometimes, and the sense of touch and everything is more intense. And it's just, I feel like I was kind of growing up on the aspect of they're like a superpower, because you can hear things they can't, you can detect things with the fingertips other people can't. Like, for example, reading Braille, like your fingertips have to be so defined to know what you're reading and everything. You can be trained in that discipline. Whereas, like, if you pass Braille to a sighted person, they're like, well, what's this? And it's like, well, I can actually, you know, read it and understand it and stuff like that. And I've got friends who can do the same.
Amazing. Very, very, yeah. Okay, so we all need to go and encourage our children to
Jump out of planes.
yeah, jump out planes. They're brilliant.
I mean,
Thank
yeah, my mum also got me a quad bike and stuff. I mean, I don't necessarily live a life of luxury, but she's never once disheartened me if I wanted to do something. She's always kind of found a way to, or she's definitely like my advocate for fighting in my corner and everything, because if I haven't got a voice, she definitely does. And she's brilliant like that. Like, I wanted to go work with wolves for 2 weeks. I've got a massive passion for dogs and wolves and everything, so high fixation of mine. And she made it work. We found a B&B nearby. They picked me up and dropped me off in the location and stuff like that, and it just worked really, really well, and I loved it. And it was all because of the fact that people, you know, are more lenient nowadays of vision, of, you know, how to be more accommodating. I find.
Good. Well, your mentees are very lucky to have you, and Eliza, you will make an incredible mentor as well.
Thank you.
There are some, I know, Joe, that you're poised to feedback from chat for us.
Yeah, I've just had a look. Sarah's asked a question for Imogen. How do you manage to get an emotional support dog?
So, emotional support dog, it is quite a minefield. You can get one, you can register your dog online for £50, and you get an ID and everything else like that. However, there is training to be done. Now, if you literally Google ESA in capitals, emotional support animal, into Google and put UK at the end of it, it comes up. But there is training to be done. Now, I was fortunate enough, obviously, just with my canine course, I could incorporate what I was learning at uni into the dog. And they also provide, if you have a if you have a doctor's note, kind of saying why you need one and stuff for evidence, they're more than happy to kind of teach you through the training and stuff. And I also found that contacting guide dogs and asking for their advice and what trainers they recommended, it wasn't ridiculously expensive. I have a friend going through a similar situation. It was mainly more like, you know, this is how you do it and everything else like that. The dog needs to be trained. I mean, I can leave Purdy in my office and no one knows she's there. But it's just, and it does take time. So it's just about patience and timing and stuff like that. And people, yeah, if you just Google ESA emotional support animal, it will come up, and then it will kind of talk you through step by step on how to do it.
We'll add it to our documents. It's 9:15, but I just wondered if anyone's got any thoughts or reflections on this evening. QTVI had to go, but she stayed much longer than I expected her to, Laura, because I think she was absolutely kind of engrossed and kind of taking notes from all of us as well. And I really love that. I like the fact that when we get professionals to our groups, it's a partnership, it's a two-way thing as well. So I always take a lot of comfort from that. So I will make sure that I follow up with her and thank her and see if she can actually share some of the things she was talking about, like put them in down on paper. Have you got any other thoughts, Ellen? Put you on the spot again. You are so brilliant. Everyone wants your resources.
No, it's great to hear from the mentors and to just hear their experiences. Really, really helpful. So thanks to them, really.
Yeah, you got lots of very, very appreciative comments in the chat, Lisa and Imogen. So thank you. Anything else? We probably it's such a big topic, but what I'm going to do is share the list. And it's probably not an exhaustive list, but of where our children can meet up and socialise with groups across the country, including the national groups. Look itself has got our Look Fest, which is in the summer, so we've not released like the ticketing yet, but I will let you all know because you're my inner circle as soon as they go on sale. So I think we'll have like early birds for our families. So that is very good. And we've also got Jamie's Farm opportunity. So if you've got any of your young people, there is a cost, but it's this amazing week where 8 young people get to spend a week on a farm with mentors, 4 mentors. And it's about friendship and bonding and working the farm, and it is really, really amazing. So I'm going to share that information. And for those who don't know about Victor has got an extensive list of activities that you can get involved with, both as family but also your young people as they get older. So they do activities up to 29. So actually there's, if you've got a 20-year-old or a 19-year-old who would like to go off and spend time with other young people with visual impairment and do that, is another avenue as well. Charlotte M, have you got any other thoughts?
No, I think you've covered everything that I was going to say. Yeah, about Jamie's Farm and obviously about the mental project that we offer, which I know a lot of you will already know about, is obviously connecting young people and children with a visual impairment to an older visually impaired mentor, as our lovely 2 mentors here tonight are a part of. So yeah, you can make an inquiry through the info@look-uk.org email address, and yeah, it's an ever-growing program. So if you're interested, then give us a shout.
It is, and actually as part of our schools offer, if please get in touch with our mentor team, because we do offer workshops in schools. Yeah, and it is a really positive way of kind of this peer awareness and inclusion, and your child will be involved as much or as little as and it will be led by them. So it is, it's another way of getting kind of holding the microscope up to schools and saying, come on, we need to make sure that you're including our children properly. It was really great to hear from just how she endorsed what we all thought as well. So that's good. So hopefully she will share that with me, and I can share it all with you. So I will be sending out some documents later this week. But thank you all for participating, and please add anything before we go if there's any other final thoughts. There's lots of praise. Somebody said that I have an EHCP meeting tomorrow morning, and I've now some very helpful materials. So yeah, brilliant. Ellen, I think we should always have an expert parent in our sessions, because actually I think that's why we set this group up, isn't it? Because as parents, we are the ones that come up with some of the, solutions sometimes. And professionals are very busy, but we've always got time for each other. So, and I can let you all know that our next talking session, which you're all welcome to come to, is on March the 14th. And it will just be a come and say how things are. And I will be here, and so will Joe. Joe, would you like to say anything?
No, I'm just looking at the chat, Jane.
Yeah.
Just Kim said, I think it just reflects what everyone's thinking. Thank you so much all. Such a great session, and the mentors are inspiring.
They are so brilliant. And so Sarah's asked about schools to post 18. So Charlotte, we can ask that, can't we? Our next kind of we have got a new Thomas Pocklington Trust have funded us we've got a new student mentor scheme, a new officer starting this week, isn't it?
Yeah, she's starting tomorrow.
So she will be supporting students who are thinking about going on to university, kind of with all the prep and everything up to the first year. Is that right? Kind of matching mentors, the mentees.
Yeah, she'll be supporting students who would like to go to uni and have expressed interest in that, but then also students who are in university up to the end of their first year. So we currently do offer a uni mentoring channel as part of the mentoring project, but we really wanted to grow that, so that is why we have a new staff member starting tomorrow. But also on like the non-uni topic, we have run quite recently, we ran a workshop at a college in Manchester, and that was focusing on self-advocacy, what is available, not just university, but focusing on like work experience, placements, the work-life balance. We did a workshop on that not too long ago in Manchester, and that was for post 16, so it wasn't post 18, but it was post 16, so them later years. But yeah, that was more like of a general overview and not just uni focused. So yeah, we have done a few workshops like that, but yeah, we have new staff members starting tomorrow who will be focusing on the more of the uni aspect.
So I need to just thank you very much. Thank Ellen and Imogen and Lisa, if you're still here. Is she gone now? Yeah, just because it was amazing. What brilliant kind of input you've given, and hopefully see some of you on March the 14th. It's definitely the 14th. It's a Tuesday. Have a really good evening, and yeah, see you all soon.